let's get started. So welcome to today's webinar, How to Exceed with Marketo Engagement Programs. Now, engagement programs are one of the most complicated areas of Marketo. And so there's a lot to learn, there's a lot to understand. It's a bit of trial and error, but you will get there with these hints and tips throughout this webinar. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm James Fletcher. I'm a Marketo Solutions Architect here at JTF Marketing. I'm the CEO, and ultimately, one of my challenges of Marketo has always been, how do we master engagement programs? How do we get them right? How do we make them scalable? Because they always feel like this challenge that we can never quite get right. There's things that go wrong with them all the time. We can't control them, but there's also this perception that they're very slow, but actually they're not always that slow. It's just the way that we perceive them because of the way in which we've built them. So there's a couple of things that we'll cover today, specifically around how to build engagement programs, how to check that you've got best practice, and importantly, measuring success. What does it look like? How do we know whether it's working? Because you might have already built something. I'm sure you've had a stab at it. I mean, most of the instances we see at JTF Marketing, a lot of our customers have actually built a drip program in an engagement stream because it feels nice and easy to do, which isn't wrong. It's just then how do we extend beyond that drip campaign as well? So for those of you new to JTF Marketing, we've been around for about 8 years now. We specialize in Marketo, and we really help our customers maximize the platform and drive return on investment. Again, everything is all aligned to your business. So whilst we're all niche and we've all got our unique ways of working, we ultimately all use Marketo in the same way. We want to apply the features and functionality in order to generate more leads and in order to attribute revenue to marketing spend. So you'll see a couple of logos on the screen. These are some of the organizations we work with across multiple industries. So there's no industry that we don't work with at the moment. Again, this is really interesting because we see lots of different use cases and how they can potentially be applied to different industries as well. Some, like tech being much more fast-paced than, let's say, financial services, for example, or professional services business tend to lag behind. Use case is pretty broad, from integrations to education, as well as just getting those wildest dreams built in Marketo. So first, let's talk about engagement programs and why they're actually really cool. They're powerful. They're actually quite simple when you break them down into the different elements, and I will take you through those elements. There's kind of 3 key elements to this. One is they're a really powerful execution engine, and we must get that right. It's an execution engine. It's not a tracking engine. It's not about measuring behavior. If we start getting into that, it will get really complicated. The second is we can actually get personalization on scale at the right point in time based on a customer journey. So when you line up your engagement program with a customer journey, you can start to personalize through those different steps. So take the example of someone with an open opportunity in your CRM. You want to target them and reinforce your brand, reinforce your case studies. You can do that not only by email, but through AdBridge as well, which we did a webinar on a couple of weeks ago, in order to serve up digital ads, which will bring that customer back to you or remind you that that you are the right place for them to be. The third one is then looking at scale, right, and productivity. So how do we get more out of Marketo is one of the questions I hear all the time. And this really comes back to the way you use it. If you build email campaign after email campaign after email campaign, you might as well cancel your subscription and go and buy MailChimp, because that is the basics. That is MailChimp. It's the basic automation. Sure, maybe a drip campaign. Again, you can do that in MailChimp. Go buy it, go save yourself a load of money. If you really want to get to scalable marketing communications or marketing automation strategy, then you need to look at engagement programs to help you do so. Why? It's going to help you build an always-on model. I drop someone new in at the top, they go through a mini funnel, let's say, and they're going to get a series of content, which is going to drive them to either give me more data points or start a conversation. Ideally, we want everybody to come through that we're nurturing to start a conversation tomorrow. The reality is engagement programs are typically targeting existing data sets within your database or data that you've acquired through acquisition channels, advertising, trade shows, etc. So again, the idea is about prioritizing these leads in order to get them further down the funnel, but also making sure that the quality is good as we go through. So let's just take a quick look at the anatomy of an engagement program. There's quite a lot in an engagement program, and this is a screenshot from a little while ago, 2021, but it's not changed other than a few colors from the Adobe UI that's appeared. So there's a couple of things to look at, right? First things first, we've got this view element. So we've got 4 different views within an engagement program: the summary, the used by, membership, and dashboard. So the one on the screen now is the dashboard. It's the most good looking of the screens, but ultimately it's the one that's going to actually tell you most information about what is happening. The next, you've got this little stream drop down, and that's basically allowing you to see everything as an engagement program as a whole or a single stream. So if you've built your engagement program in line with different industries, or maybe it's different milestones of the customer journey, you can then start to filter those and look at specific information related to that. Now, this is really interesting when you line it up to your customer journey, because you can be targeting net new people, trying to get them to a qualified stage. Therefore, you can start to see what's working and what's not. You can then start to optimize the content, which I'll come to in a second. The next thing that's really interesting is the engagement score. So engagement score only is available in engagement programs, which is very annoying because actually it's a nice way of summarizing an individual email send. Now, the way that this works is it's an algorithm used by Adobe in the background in order to say how many people we sent it to, how many have opened, how many have clicked, how many have unsubscribed, therefore give it an overall score out of 100. Now, you'll see down in the right-hand side, we've got the highest engagement, which shows 90, 89, etc. Now, good is considered 80 and above. And I would love to say that everything in this little drop-down list here, which I'll show you a live example of shortly, is above 80, but it's not. Now, there's something important here. The way we use engagement programs, we actually can use them in 2 different ways. One, using embedded default programs or event programs, or by using only emails. Now, we typically use embedded programs because they're a little bit easier to control. And I'll get into the detail of that in a second. But that's why you see here, we've got a 0 unsubscribe rate. If you're just using emails within your engagement program, you'll see this very important metric as well. The next one is the next cast date. So casts are how often do we send content, and that might differ per stream. So again, if you're looking at everything, the next email that's going to go out across any one of your streams is within a specific time frame. If you are looking at something, specific stream, let's say it's your MQL stream, you can then see that the next cast is going to be in 1 week's time. Why is that really important? Because the way we build engagement programs in Marketo means that we don't need to have all the content ready from day one. We can actually build it up over time. And that's a common misconception when we think about lead nurturing, that we've got to build this great bank of content and then start pushing it out the door and hoping it all works. Because we have this horrible mentality in marketing that everything that goes out the door has to be perfect. Actually, the 80-20 rule applies. Let's get it out, let's test and learn. Let's get it out, test and learn. How do we optimize? And that's the habit that we should be in, not just batch and blasting. Now, this bottom right metric is really, really important because there's a few different views on this. You'll see here on the list to the right-hand side, you've got highest engagement, lowest engagement, newest content, oldest content. Now, as you build up your engagement program over time, this is actually really important for optimization because you're going to be sitting there at the end of the quarter going, right, we've got all these leads. Some have moved through the funnel, some haven't. What am I going to do next? How do I optimize? What am I looking for next? There is a great checklist on our website for optimizing engagement programs. So if you've not seen it before, go get it. I'll make sure the link is in the follow-up as well, so that you can go and grab that. But ultimately, this is the key parts of an engagement program. Of course, you then get streams and transition rules, which is the bit we're going to move on to now. And this is where everybody dives into first, right? Build this piece out. But actually, one of the most important things to think about from your engagement program is how does it fit into everything else that I'm doing? Is it going to be the core focus of every lead that we bring into the database, or is it picking up only a segment of that data? You know, who's going to be in this? How are we going to do this? And again, there's another webinar specifically on designing engagement programs in our resource center on the website. But again, here we've got a couple of different views: the content, how well is the content performing, engagement, showing us that engagement score. And again, I'll show you a live example of this in a second. We've then got people. So how many people are in each one, each cast, each send, which can often be quite confusing. You'll also get at the bottom of a stream, once you've run out of content, this red label saying X number of people exhausted from your content. We then get the cadence, which is really important. So how often are we going to send this content? And everybody asked me the same question. So how often should we send the content? And it really depends on the stage, how fast they've come into the funnel, what you're expecting them to do, what kind of nurture is it? Is it an education? Is it a lead conversion? There's a million questions. So you've got to, again, test and learn and find out what works nice for you guys. You've also got to consider how many emails do you send in general, and how do you make sure that it's not too many and too quick. But ultimately here, we've got the option to send weekly, monthly. We can then choose the first date that it's going to send, and then we can choose the sequence then. So is it every 1 week? Is it every 2 weeks? Is it every 6 weeks? And then one thing to watch out for is choosing the on day. So how many times will this send throughout a given week? So if it runs weekly and you choose multiple days, it will go on multiple days. So people will keep moving through. Now, one thing to be aware of here, you'll see the recipient time zones. If you're working across multiple geographies, you might want to enable this. Because we're using default embedded programs, it's not available to us. But if you were using emails directly in the program, you can actually use that recipient time zone. So again, that's something just to be aware of if you need to be making sure your communications are going out to a specific region. Now, when we start talking about transition rules, these are really confusing because everybody thinks transitioning is from one thing to another, not transitioning into the stream. So these are always inclusion rules in my head. So we're looking at anybody who's about to change the revenue stage and the revenue model and bring them into the MQL stage, and then anything else that changes based on a list of smart list conditions. Now, I mentioned before that aligning these engagement programs to revenue models are really important in Marketo. Why? It's going to save you a lot of admin because the rules of in and out, change, that one's pause that, do this, do that, as someone moves through your funnel is actually quite hard to manage unless you've got it in one central place. And if you don't know much about revenue models, again, there's another webinar that I've done a couple of times now on revenue models and what they actually mean in Marketo and why they should be the backbone of everything you do. This is a good example, right? So I have my backbone that's in place, my revenue model that's got a bunch of known people, new people, which we don't do anything with because we manually review them and then add them into MQL in this nurture campaign. Then everybody who's qualified then starts to get some of this content on a bi-weekly basis. What then happens is as that person moves through our revenue model, so let's say they jump from an MQL to someone who said, hey, I want to have a conversation with you. I want you to build me an engagement program. Then that person would jump from MQL straight to SQL, where we've got a different stage which they would be in. What happens in an engagement model then is you completely remove them out of that stream. They pause all communications and they move into a different stream where they would get different content. So it's really, really important and actually in a way easier to use these conditions. Now, there is one pro to using default programs or even event programs within your streams embedded into the engagement programs. And it is that you can have a bit of additional control. So as we know, within a default program, you would have a smart campaign that's driving your logic. Your logic is going to be requested from the engagement program. And that engagement program is going to say, send this email or do whatever you've got to do to these 10,000 people. What your smart campaign is then doing is going, actually, I don't want all 10,000. I'll have 500 of them, and I will then send them something. Now, what happens in this scenario is you don't see the engagement score unless they meet the success criteria of the embedded program. So you might see here that I've got some that are blank and then some that have 90 on them. So these are really important things as you start to think about how you're going to configure it and how you're going to build that out. So let's have a look at some real world examples. Okay, so one report that's really worth taking a look at, let me zoom in a little, is this engagement stream performance reports, this little green leaf that goes back to the little flower pot. that, when you click through to it, will give you a list of all the emails that have been sent or all the programs that have been sent within each one of those pots. And you can scroll through here. You can start to see the overall engagement score of every piece of content that lives there, as well as what is the email performance based on that email that's been sent. Now, this becomes interesting because, again, if you can see some unsubscribes, you might be wanting to pull those out or understand them a little bit better. Or even in this case, where I've got no engagement score whatsoever, which means that someone hasn't actually gone and downloaded or visited an insight or whatever it was I wanted them to do, you can then go and look at that email and start to optimize it. What you can also do is look at these and go, do I really want to keep this in the stream? Is it really working? Or should I be removing it? The way this current nurture works is actually we're dropping new people in constantly. So that's why you see some big chunky numbers at the top with some unsubscribes and lots of bounces. And then it gets a little bit better as we go further down. And again, the order of these, you can move them around. The idea is that we take out anything that doesn't work and start moving up the content that does work to drive engagement. That will either be your lead score, it might be filling in values in your database, or you might be looking for a conversion altogether. So jumping back now into the engagement program itself. So the structure here, you'll see I've got MQL, SAL, SQL, and customer. And again, as you saw in the example, these are all lined up to the revenue model stages, which is really important. And ultimately, I've got this content available in here. The way that we embed it is using a smart campaign, as I mentioned to you before, but ultimately we can also start to play around with whether it's active or deactivated, whether it's get a certain period. So let's say you're running an event, you can actually disable that event after a certain amount of time. So a good example is when we run a webinar like this, we will add it into this engagement program. It will be available for up to 3 months, and then we'll take it out of that engagement program. We then typically rerun them with fresh content and then look for optimizations. Of course, we've got the different views here as well. So we're looking at the content view currently. If I expand that out, you'll start to see, of course, the people view here. So how many people actually have gone through. You can see 109,000 people have gone through this download program, but 51 were in the latest cast. And if I scroll all the way to the bottom, I'll see that there's some new content in here that no one's had yet. So again, I'm keeping an eye on that, keeping it fresh, adding stuff in it as I create it. And of course, this will give me the full view at the bottom as well. Now, when we start to look at engagement here, again, we get the same metrics as we saw in the other report, but maybe in a slightly more simplistic view, because we can now start dragging and dropping stuff around, because we can move that to the top because we know it works, versus where it currently sat, and I hope it was sitting there. If you reorder so any of the assets within the engagement programs, it doesn't really matter, because the people who've already gone through it will never go through it again unless you've got certain rules set up within the program itself. But if it's an email, it won't make any hassle. So that's good to know as well. Again, when we look at the dashboard here, giving you a real life example. So I've got all my streams. Let's take a look at my MQL stream. I've got an engagement score of 90, which is fantastic. No unsubscribe rate because I'm using embedded programs. And my next cast is in 2 weeks, which tells me I've got 2 weeks to make any changes before the next email goes out. Now, of course, it's great looking at brilliant content, but I'm interested in the lowest engagement. So, you know, what's happening with it? What should I pull in, pull out? Is there anything that I need to do with it? Of course, where you've got 0 cent, you're going to have no engagement score, but where I've got something that maybe has some data against it and it hasn't worked, then I would then look at pulling that out as well. Again, taking a look at the newest content that's going in, so when was it added? The 14th and the 6th, so it's pretty good. Or some of the oldest content. Is it the best content? Is it working as well? So again, this download here, I probably need to go and look at optimizing it in order to get the best out of that asset itself. So that's a kind of whistle stop tour. I know there's a load of questions, so let me just jump back into the slides again, and we can wrap up and get into some of the questions. So a couple of examples that I've given you already is follow a revenue model, making sure that you're following a customer journey, you're achieving the milestones that you need to achieve in your customer journey. So often that is collecting data points along the way or building a score over time, pretty important. Integrate it with your lead scoring is really important as well. So making sure that it's actually feeding the lead score in the right way. And I don't mean by just they've clicked 5 emails and now they're ready to have a phone call. That's not real lead scoring. I'm sorry to break it to you. Actually think about what is going to determine that they are giving you insights to their propensity to buy. So have a think about that. The other one is actually building out proposition scoring as part of your engagement program. So if you're trying to align to certain products or industries, give them points for engagement on that basis, because that will allow maybe you're a salesperson in order to steer the conversation, right? Oh, I saw you were interested in electric vehicles as well as diesel vehicles. Maybe we should have a conversation about that. Or this is the first time that you've shown any interest in this product over here, but you've actually got an older product that's not compatible with this new one. How about I sell you both things at once? So again, there's lots of different ways that we can actually start to pull that together into some insights for sales as well. Now, I've talked a lot about customer journey. I've talked a lot about revenue models. This useful template on the website is something I definitely recommend you go and download. It's fairly easy to fill out, so you can give each one of your steps in your customer journey a description as well as a name. And then you can start to question yourself and say, what are the data points that makes up an MQL? And if you get that answer straight away, I will be very pleased for you, and we should probably talk to figure out how you managed to do it. Because often it takes a little bit of time, a little bit of back and forth with sales as well to say, what are the questions that you're asking to qualify a lead? What we can then do is build them in upfront in order to get more engagement with our campaigns, or collect those data points in order to build up a sales ready lead. Now, JTF Marketing can help you. We are a specialist Marketo partner, so we only do Marketo. Everything we focus on is about maximizing Marketo to the best possible capability, and again, tailoring it for your business, making sure that it fits, making sure that it works. And that there was a phrase that came out in a branding session yesterday, which is, we love a challenge. So we really love challenges. So if you've got a really complex scenario that you want to go and talk about, please do get in touch. We're happy to talk to you and see whether we can come up with something that will help you. Finally, there's a free audit available. I've got so many calls to actions in this slide. So there is a free audit. We run these on a regular basis for our customers. They are insights into how you're using Marketo, can often be quite useful for building out a roadmap. So definitely have a look at that. There's some useful recommendations that come out of the report itself. And it's pretty insightful actually to see how well do you use the platform and what are you paying for and where are your opportunity. Of course, anything else that you need or you want to talk about in terms of engagement programs, feel free to drop us a line. We're happy just to chat it through to the fat and make sure that you've got all the information you need. And join us on the next webinar in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you very much.